The road in front of them was nothing more than a ribbon of cracked asphalt that vanished into the night after they had been driving for hours. Emily gazed out the window, watching the shadows of the dense forest pass by in the dim moonlight, while Jake, exhausted but determined to get home, kept his eyes on the road. The only sounds to break the dense silence between them were the distant call of a lone owl and the sporadic hum of the engine. A motel's faint, uneven neon sign suddenly emerged through the trees and mist, illuminating a cracked parking lot covered in fallen leaves and other debris with a sickening glow. The letters on the sign, "Rest Easy Motel," flickered in and out as it buzzed wildly. The tires crunched on gravel as they pulled into the small office, relieved and in dire need of a break. The building appeared worn, with windows obscured by dirt and peeling paint. The air inside was stale, with a slight hint of cigarette smoke and mildew. A man sat behind the front desk, his face shadowed and lined with fatigue, his eyes hollow. He slid a corroded metal key across the counter without saying a word. With a gravelly voice, he said softly, "Room 12. Jake looked at Emily, who nodded despite swallowing uneasily. The clerk looked at them for a moment longer, as though to warn them without saying anything. Their room was in a small, poorly lit hallway with flickering fluorescent lights humming low overhead. The wallpaper peeled off in long strips, exposing cracked plaster underneath, and the carpet was soiled and threadbare. A blast of chilly air, much colder than the night outside, hit them as Jake unlocked the door to room 12 and entered. The room was small and claustrophobic, with an old television set quietly sitting in the corner, a cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall, and a sagging bed with faded sheets. Emily saw a tiny handwritten note taped at eye level on the back of the door. "Don't listen to the whispers," it said. She tried to ignore the shiver that was running down her spine as she laughed nervously and tore it down. They tried to blend in with the uncomfortable silence that pervaded the room as they quietly unpacked their bags. Emily tried to divert her attention by browsing through her phone, but the signal was spotty and weak, while Jake lit a cigarette and leaned against the dresser. Outside, a strange mingling of barely audible voices and almost living wood creaked as the wind rustled through the trees. Every creak and gentle moan from the old building sounded louder as the minutes went by, thickening the atmosphere in the room. Emily claimed to have heard faint, incomprehensible, but persistent enough whispers coming from the hallway to make her hair stand on end. Even though Jake brushed it off as the wind or old pipes, he couldn't help but notice how the shadows in the corners appeared to stretch and twitch strangely. As the clock struck midnight, the television came to life on its own, displaying a brief image of a dark figure standing outside their door, before static filled the screen. The figure simply watched without moving or blinking. The screen went black once more as Emily gasped and gripped Jake's arm. As though prodded by an invisible hand, the door suddenly creaked open just enough to let in a small portion of the chilly, dim hallway. The murmurs intensified, encircling them and encircling the room in an unseen embrace of fear. The sound of footsteps pacing outside continued even after Jake reached out and slammed the door shut. Rather, they became closer and heavier, as if something were moving just outside the flimsy walls. Jake's face hardened with a mix of frustration and fear, while Emily pulled the covers up to her chin, her eyes wide in the darkness. They weren't by themselves. Whatever was haunting room 12 was starting to reveal itself, and the motel was full of secrets. Jake and Emily sat motionless in the dark room, the silence weighing them down as the minutes seemed to drag on forever. They shivered as they heard the slow, deliberate footsteps outside the door continue. As shadows moved across the peeling wallpaper, Emily's breath became labored, and she gripped the blanket tightly. Hesitantly, Jake reached for the old TV remote and pressed the power button. After a brief burst of static, the screen showed an empty hallway, save for a shadowy figure that slowly appeared at the far end. With a twisted, unnatural gait, it glided toward the camera without making any sound. "Jake, do you see that?" Emily whispered, her voice catching in her throat. The figure stopped just outside the door of the motel room, its form distorted and flickering like a broken reflection, and he nodded while swallowing hard and keeping his eyes fixed on the screen. The television abruptly clicked off, and the image on the screen turned to static, leaving the room nearly dark, save for the faint moonlight peeking through the broken curtains. They heard the whispers again, louder and more urgent, swirling around them in a frantic symphony of voices, in a language neither of them could understand. The door handle began to rattle violently, as though someone or something was trying to break in. Jake's heart pounded against his ribs as he hurried over and slammed the deadbolt. A low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through the walls accompanied the frantic rattling. The chair in the corner scraped across the floor by itself, coming to a stop just inches from where they were standing, and Emily screamed while holding Jake's arm. Their breaths turned to visible mist as the temperature in the room dropped even further. Even though no one was around, a chilly, persistent hand brushed past Emily's cheek. Jake edged toward the door, snatching a splintered piece of the dresser as a makeshift weapon. The lights abruptly flickered wildly before going out entirely, leaving them in a dense, lifelike darkness. The muttering intensified into wailing cries that reverberated from the walls. And then there was silence. A dim light started to come from the mirror in that stillness. A pale face emerged from within the shattered glass, its eyes hollow and sorrowful, its face distorted like water. Emily staggered back and knocked over a lamp that broke on the floor, scattering shards of light that appeared to be stars. The face in the mirror mouthed the soundless words, "Help me." Resolution replaced desperation. Emily refused to move when Jake took her hand and dragged her to the door. The TV character suddenly materialized behind them, whispering, "You shouldn't have come," its icy breath obscuring the air. The ceiling was unreasonably high, the walls were leaking shadows, and the room was twisted and warped. The air became suffocatingly heavy, and panic gripped them both. The motel's front door exploded open, letting harsh daylight into the room just as their strength gave out. The room went back to normal, the bed drooping, the peeling wallpaper hanging limp, the ominous presence dissipating like mist. Breathless, their eyes wide with shock, Jake and Emily staggered out. The motel was silent and unaffected by the morning sun outside, but Emily discovered a note taped to the door once more that said, "Leave before night falls." As the sun rose behind them, they drove away without turning around, but they would never be able to shake the memory of the motel and the creature that hid in room 12. Did you like today's video? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your supernatural story as a topic. See you later.